Today's webinar is substantiating claims for sun care and SPF products. So as I was saying, it's kind of a weird time to be thinking about this, certainly if you're based in the UK as I am, because right now it's pretty grey outside. We're not really thinking about sun care. But obviously in terms of product development, people are going to be looking at developing sun care now, ready for the summer. And certainly you want to be considering your testing and making sure that you've got your testing planned to fit, around people testing it at the right time. And also with SPF products, and we'll talk about this in a bit more detail, it's very much the way the world is kind of looking, the industry's looking. People are very conscious of using SPF products regardless of weather, because of all the other benefits that we're looking at by protecting your skin. So really, it's just a good webinar to think about in terms of the way of the world right now as well. So the agenda today, we're going to do an overview of the sun care industry. We're going to look at global regulations for advertising to see where claims fits into it. We're going to look at some successful sun care marketing claims and a summary of consumer research, so we can look at how you can substantiate those claims. And in with that, we're going to look at some case studies which will help give you an idea of what the study design and methodology should be. So to introduce myself, if you haven't met me already, my name's Carys and I am the Regulatory Director at Ayton Global Research. So really I'm interested in regulations that are surrounding advertising and usually things like cosmetics industry, although we do test in other FMCG industries. So what I'm really looking at is making sure that our test designs are going to be regulatory compliant, especially when we're looking at advertising claims, especially when we're looking at that globally. We need to make sure the evidence we're providing our clients is going to, be suitable for where they're launching their products. So yes, I've been working with the company for about 8 years now, so really familiar with things like study design and making sure that all fits into the overall regulatory picture. So the sun care market, so we can kind of get our brains thinking about this in particular as an industry. So back in August 2019, I got this kind of excerpt from an article that obviously the sun protection market is looking to grow and surge over 10 years. So the sun care market is covering everything from anything that's got an SPF, sun protection, also things like self-tanning comes under that category as well when we're looking at masks. So obviously there's quite a lot of different products there, a lot of really popular products and product types. So people are looking beyond the UV protection, as I mentioned earlier, and really thinking about anti-aging and anti-pollution, generally making the skin sort of look better, feel better, and be protected. So certainly, it's something we've talked about in the industry. We know that a lot of skin aging comes from it being unprotected, things like sun damage. So it's a really good industry to look at with overall looking better, really. So the sun care market as well is very much driven towards the organic and natural sort of part of the industry. So they kind of come in together really well. Certainly we're looking at the kind of damage of the coral reefs. That's been a big part of it as well. So what kind of chemicals that have been in sun cream that have actually been really damaging to marine life. And that's kind of where we're seeing this the natural and organic sort of area go as well. I want to talk about the impact of COVID-19. It's obviously something that we need to discuss and think about basically with product development and marketing. This is obviously about a year now that we've really had this global pandemic, and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon, very unfortunately. We can be very optimistic, but we do need to consider what that impact that has on the market and what impact it could have on the products that we're developing. So Mintel did a report actually about specifically the impact of COVID-19 on sun care. So I'd recommend taking a look at it if it's something you're interested in. But really they've seen a decline in sales by about 24%. So it's really significant. They do think that there'll be a growth again, but it really is dependent on travel. The huge part of the sun care market is from travel, really. People going to much hotter climates. Because, if you have a skin type that is going to be very exposed to burning and things like that, certainly myself, very fair skinned, if I go abroad I need to make sure I've got lots of sun protection, whereas in the UK I might sort of use a daily SPF, but I'm not really too worried overall. So that's obviously a huge part of the market that needs to grow. We have seen though that obviously in countries, like Indonesia, China, Japan, and other Asian countries, the demand has stayed intact because obviously for people that are very domestic there, or people traveling within the countries, obviously there's some protection that is needed because it's hotter climate essentially, and the consumers are more interested in using SPF products and protecting their skin and keeping a fair complexion as well. So it's an interesting one. If you're looking at kind of North America and Europe, you may not be huge demand for developing new sun protection products. However, you can think about those markets as well in the Asian countries. So it's kind of pointing your kind of attention towards maybe what markets are going to be more successful this year. So, ad self-regulation is something that we really need to talk about when we're looking at claims, because essentially it is how the industry regulates itself when it comes to marketing. So basically, there's different self-regulatory organisations that exist, and they kind of are done by country usually. Sometimes there's group territories like the European Advertising Standards Alliance, but within that, each country has their own advertising standards as well. We're making sure that basically adverts are legal, decent, honest, and truthful, making sure there's evidential support. So we've got an even playing field. We want to make sure the adverts are fair to the consumer, but also fair to the competitors. Because if you're saying kind of things about your products that you haven't got evidential support behind, it's not fair to the competitors that maybe can't say that because they can't substantiate that claim, or maybe they are saying it but they put a lot of investment into it. So generally it kind of works as a complaints basis. So either if you're a consumer or you are a competitor, or your consumers or competitors yourself, can put in complaints about your product if they don't think that the product has achieved what you've claimed it to be able to achieve. And really, it's all based on that. There is a slight policing of the industry, but generally, that is how we're looking at things. There are so many thousands of products out there with thousands of claims. The ASA, for example, in the UK, can't sort of go through every single product that comes on the market and check that the claims are compliant and investigate it. It would be overwhelming. So it really has to be done on a complaints basis. And that's why it's self-regulatory. We're really dependent on the industry caring enough and being aware of it enough so that you're doing those processes anyway and that you haven't got someone policing you all the time. So there's three parts of the industry, and if you're kind of under any of these parts, you really need to be aware of the regulations. That's the advertisers who pay for the advertising agency is responsible for its form and content, and the media that carry it. So if any of those apply to you, you need to be aware of the advertising standards in the countries that you're selling your products, not just where you're manufacturing them, it's also where you're selling them as well. There's a couple of resources there that I wanted to point your attention to. So there's the ICC, so the International Chamber of Commerce, and they have a framework for self-regulatory organisations that they can adopt. So that's quite a good one. It's about 42 countries worldwide that currently use that framework. It's a really good starting point to see what that looks like basically, and also which countries are using it, because they'll all be kind of under the same code of conduct. There's also ICAS, which is the International Council of Ad Self-Regulation, and that was set up by the ASA. So it's a lot of European countries, but it's also worldwide. So places in the USA, Asia, Australia are all part of that council as well. And again, it's a really good place to start looking to find codes of conduct, and also where they're releasing news about things that are happening in the industry in ad self-regulation, basically. So I just want to give some examples of some self-regulatory organisations so you can see what that looks like. So in the UK, we've got the Advertising Standards Authority. India's got the Advertising Standards Council of India. Australia has ad standards, and Brazil has the National Advertising Self-Regulatory Council. So I wanted to kind of give you kind of examples to say that there are global organisations that you need to be aware of. The four I've mentioned are all part of that ICAS I mentioned earlier. The USA is slightly different. I've put the Federal Trade Commission, and also they work with the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration for cosmetics. They're an important one to be aware of because they're not self-regulatory. They're actually a federal organisation, and they do tend to police the industry more. The USA is just a very strange country when it comes to claims, because there isn't as much guidance about the evidence that's needed necessarily for claims. However, if you get sort of caught doing misleading advertising, you're more likely to be landed with a lawsuit than just a sort of slap on the wrist or told to remove your ads. So it's just really important to be aware of. There's also different laws, and again, I just wanted to touch base on those to say, even if you look at a country and you see that there's no self-regulatory organisation, there could be laws. And even if they do have a self-regulatory organisation, if the code of conduct isn't very clear about, misleading advertising or something like that, you might find that there's laws that cover that as well. So a few examples of kind of what to be aware of is laws as well. In the UAE, they've got the Advertising Business Group, which is their self-regulatory organisation, but they also have the National Media Council, who kind of work hand in hand with them. And they have, basically look at advertising, create advertising law, and they enforce the penalties as well. There's quite harsh fines in the UAE for misleading adverts. So again, really, really careful to be aware of things there. It's a great market for SPF products and sun care as well. So be really aware of what the laws are out there. The FDA, again, I've kind of mentioned them before, so they're working alongside the FTC essentially when it comes to cosmetics. The FDA are very much putting out the information to say what you should have as in terms of evidence, and then enforcing it with the FTC. China also has the advertising law of the People's Republic of China, and again, that really outlines information about misleading adverts. So going back specifically to sun care, that's kind of the overview of who's going to be looking out for your adverts when they're out there. But obviously, when you're putting out a sun care product, there is, you have to make sure it's been developed for the right category and that you're getting it registered in the right place, in the right area. So what sun care is a bit interesting with is that it's kind of fits into different categories depending where you are in the world. And I just wanted to bring up a few examples of that. So in the EU, sun care is all cosmetics, comes under cosmetic regulation. So if you're already developing cosmetic products, it will be a very similar process. In the USA, they're actually classified as OTC drugs, so over the counter, and that means they're really strictly regulated. So it's much, much stricter than any cosmetic application you're doing in the USA. So again, if you're developing cosmetic products already and you want to look at SPF, make sure that you're aware of what the process is of that in the USA. In Australia, they come under the Therapeutic Goods Administration Act. So they're not classified as cosmetics. They come under the TGA, which has its own application process. However, cosmetics that are not sunscreening but contain an SPF are cosmetics. So it's not quite as black and white as the USA and the EU, where they're all cosmetics or they're all OTC. They could fall under either. So be cautious again if you're looking at Australia. About sun care testing as well. There's obviously different testing you need to be aware of with sun care. We'll be looking really at claims substantiation in this webinar, but I wanted to obviously bring it up because you're looking at protection as well. It's not just about do consumers like the feel or texture of it, what benefits it has to your skin. It's actually does it protect the skin as well. That's very, very important. So in the EU, there's the sun protection factor test for UVA and UVB protection. Obviously, we're looking at both UV, kind of all UV rays with sun protection as well. Globally, you have to have you have to comply with the ISO that I kind of mentioned in the slide, which is all to do with sun protection factor. USA, you need to comply with the FDA, NDA or ANDA regulations, and smaller companies as well can follow. There's the 2011 sunscreen final rule, which contains guidance for SPF. So basically, I think it's something about £25,000 kind of profit or something along the lines of that. I probably would have to look into that again. If you're under a certain amount of profit you're making on your product, you can look at the 2011 sunscreen final rule. If you're making more than that, you need to look at the FDA's NDA or ANDA regulations. So again, just pointing your kind of attention to that direction if you're thinking about developing it and you haven't developed it before, basically. So what is consumer research? Because that's what we're going to be talking about mainly when we're looking at claim substantiation today. Ayton Global Research are a provider of consumer research. That's what I do. There are obviously clinical methods you can use at substantiating claims, but I don't want to focus on those too much today, because we want to look at what we can establish through consumer research. So consumer research is always about, also referred to in-use test, and is based on the consumer perception of the product. So the self-assessed claims, we're asking consumers to assess these benefits themselves, basically what they can perceive through their naked eye or through their feel, sort of sensory things. Whereas obviously clinical, you're going to be looking much more at the side of scientific evidence. Either way, I would always recommend having some consumer evidence, because even if you have clinical evidence, for example, that there's a reduction in age spots from using the product, if the consumers can't perceive that themselves when they buy the product, they're more than likely going to complain, as we mentioned earlier, and say they didn't receive the benefits they expected. So it's really helpful to have this actual use, these actual conditions reflected in your research and behind your evidence. So it reflects the actual conditions. So it's, again, we're replicating what's going to happen when a consumer purchases your product and uses it at home, follows your usage directions. You might find that there's issues with your usage directions by doing a consumer test. We've had that before. So it's really important. And as I said, generally they're testing it at their own home and answering online questionnaires. There's also the opportunity there to do things like before and after photos, videos, whatever they can do from the comfort of their own home. Right now, with what's happening with the global pandemic, as I mentioned earlier, it's something we can't really ignore. Um, there's a real demand for in-home consumer studies, because a lot of clinical labs aren't able to open, or not do the same tests that they could do before because of the restrictions that are in place. So really looking at home user studies is what I would recommend considering for this year anyway, if you haven't started doing it already. So yeah, you may need some additional evidence. So for example, with sun cream, we can't ask the volunteers to assess SPF testing, because they can't say kind of, oh yeah, I think I'm protected by this product. It needs to be done scientifically. So yeah, always be really cautious. You're welcome to send me the claims that you want to make, and I can say, which ones we would do for consumer research and what we would do clinically. We have partners that provide clinical research as well. But generally, we want to advise consumer research because it tends to be the most cost efficient and time saving method. So what the kind of overall things you can expect to get from your consumer research? So claim substantiation, that's the main one. That's what we're talking about today. But we can also think about what other benefits you can receive from these tests. So they can assist you with new product development. You can assess the efficacy of your products and make sure it's working as it's supposed to be. Get feedback, things like the fragrance, the texture, those sort of product development sort of implications that you want to get feedback on, and really what you can achieve through this research as well. You can get brand perceptions as well as the product perception. Generally, we're looking at unbranded for claim substantiation, but there's no reason why you couldn't do a claim substantiation test unbranded. And after they've filled out all of the performance questions about the product, then reveal the brand and find out about the perception. You can combine these things. You've got a lot of freedom with consumer research. You can look at comparison testing. So this could be benchmarking against a competitor, or it could be looking at a new formulation. If you change supplier, if you need to change your formulation in any way, is it as accepted as well as the product you already had, or is it even better? Can you make the claim new and improved formula? It's something we can look at there. Investigating new markets is a huge one. As I mentioned earlier on, we're global, so we are, we're making sure that any key territories you have, we can investigate those new markets with you and make sure your claims are compliant in those markets. You can gain testimonials and reviews, photos and videos, as I mentioned earlier. And again, with that kind of product perception, you can also look at things like the packaging and what the price points would be for that product. So a lot of market research as well, generally, about your product. Kind of claims that you might see are some examples of what you might establish, so what you might substantiate with consumer research. 88% of people felt their skin was protected all day. 9 out of 10 people would recommend it to other families. We see a lot of family research with sunscreens. People agree that it's non-sticky and non-greasy. All these real claims that help sell your product take it to the next level. Instead of just saying it's got SPF protection, what else can people really hope to get when they're using this product? It's a competitive market. The whole cosmetics industry is. So whatever you can kind of say to go above and beyond that, it's going to really help you sell your products. So in terms of bringing it back to regulation, we need to be really cautious of what we're saying when it comes to cosmetic claims. Now, I've mentioned obviously that it's not always going to be a cosmetic. This is the EU regulation, but I find them a really, really good guide. These 6 criteria for cosmetic claims they lay out, I actually use in any FMCG product I'm testing. I kind of think about these common criteria no matter what I'm testing, because that's really, really helpful to make sure you're legally compliant. So obviously the first one is legal compliance. But the main thing with this is when we don't want to use legal compliance as an advertising claim. It's not fair. So you could say it complies with the EU regulation, cosmetics regulation, but actually every product has to be legally sold. So if you say that on your in your advertising, it could make it look like your competitors don't have that evidence. So yes, you need to make sure that you have the legal compliance, but don't use that as a selling point. Truthfulness, obviously you can't sort of say it has an SPF 30 if it's got an SPF 20. That's quite straightforward, but you'd be surprised what you see out there. Evidential support, always have to have evidential support, so that it doesn't matter what the well, it obviously does matter what the evidence is, but obviously whatever you said about your product, you can't just say it. It has to have come from somewhere, and that's really what we're looking at providing. It needs to be honest. So you can't say, for example, that you had a consumer study with 50 people on there, but you think actually 50 responses doesn't look very good in my marketing. It's not very robust. So I'm going to say if 80% of 50 people agreed with it, I'm going to say 80% of 100 people. Obviously, you need to quote your data exactly. It has to be completely honest and transparent. Again, that's the kind of big thing to bring up in terms of being transparent. I see it a lot where people say, in a consumer study, but they haven't said how many people, how many weeks, there's no kind of further transparency there. So be really, really clear when you're using your data in your marketing to say where it's come from completely. You need to be fair. So this could be a comparison study. You generally see comparison claims. If you said, that this moisturizer left people feeling more protected than such and such moisturizer, but actually found out that that moisturizer doesn't have any SPF in it, that wouldn't be a very fair comparison. It has to be like for like. And informed decision making. You need to be really, really clear so that your consumers can make an informed decision about purchasing your product, essentially. So, like I said, being very transparent with everything. You need to make sure that if a consumer is looking online or looking in the shop and they're seeing your product against other competitors, that they have all of the information there to be able to make a very clear decision about purchasing your product. Types of claims as well. So the CTPA, which is the Cosmetics, Toiletry and Perfumery Association, has this really good breakdown of different types of claims, which I just find really helpful when you're thinking about what claim do you want to make about your product in the first instance. This is a really good starting point. So sensory and product aesthetic claims, it's really about the look and the feel of the product. Does it feel luxurious? Does it smell I don't know, really nice? It's not a very good claim. As you can tell, I don't tend to come up with them. Does it smell good? Does it make people feel good? Yeah, exactly that. Any kind of sensorial claim you can have there, and that includes about the packaging as well. Performance claims, does it perform as intended? Is it moisturizing? Does it resist water? Anything to do with how the product actually performs. Ingredient claims, that would usually come from your material supplier. So it could be something like it has very soothing aloe vera if it's an after sun product. So obviously it needs to have aloe vera in there and at a level that it would be perceived, essentially. Always make sure you get the final product tested. So this is another thing we see quite a lot, is people have their ingredient claims from their supplier, and then just use the ingredient claims and don't get the final product tested. But it leaves you open to kind of issues, because if people, again, if they complain about the product so they didn't perceive it, you know, you have never had that final product tested to find out. You also need to make sure there's sort of restrictions there. So if you have an ingredient claim, say aloe vera, and it was in a gel when it was tested for the ingredient, but you're doing it in a lotion, that's not applicable. It has to be has to be delivered in the same format as that evidence. Oh, sorry, skipping through. It has to be delivered in the same evidence. So yeah, make sure that you are kind of very careful if you're using ingredient claims, and I would just always recommend to get the final product tested. Combination claims, it could be something to do with a sun cream and an after sun. Used together, they'll be the best sun protection, they'll be really hydrating for your skin. So you want to get them tested together to make sure you can say that they're best used together. Comparison claims, so yeah, obviously we've talked about those a bit. Could be about benchmark, could be about formulation. Subjective claims, usually what you're looking at when it comes to consumer research data. I would buy this product, things you can't measure through through an instrument. There has to be something that's an opinion. This is the best product I've ever used. I would recommend this product. You have to have that as it's a subjective thing, it's an opinion. Objective claims, that's your clinical evidence, it's your SPF 30. That's objective. We have to get that measured. There's no kind of opinion on it. That's what it is. So we kind of talk about how the claims are substantial. Well, we talked about the claims you can make, how they're regulated, but we haven't looked at any examples as of yet. So where can we see these claims? Where are we going to use them when we've got them substantiated? So I've got a few examples here for some SPF products and some sun care products that I just used online on their website. So Garnier Ombre Solaire, very popular sun care product. This is all very clinical evidence that they've used. So about things about UVA and UVB rays, refreshing the skin with a skin cooling effect, and enriched with aloe vera water. So there's our ingredient claim that we talked about. So it hydrates for up to 24 hours, but that would obviously need to be a final product clinical test to get that evidence. Charlotte Tilbury have got a SPF day cream, and you can see these are very much more consumer claims. So, you know, people agree that their wrinkles are reduced. They felt their skin was instantly moisturized. They agree their dull skin was instantly transformed. Agree skin that felt firmer, sorry, and moisturizes for up to 24 hours. So these are all, you can see the percentage ones, very much consumer claims, 103 women tested over 4 weeks. And then you've got your 24-hour claim, which is clinical. So you can always mix and match. A lot of our clients will get lots and lots of claims substantiated through a consumer research study, and then choose one or two that they want to get done clinically, because obviously it's very expensive to do these singular instrumental studies. So Drunk Elephant as well, I've got their SPF 30 daily defense protection. And again, we've got some consumer testing results. So people were saying their skin felt protected, it felt gentle and non-irritating, skin is soft and smooth, skin is more hydrated, skin has a healthy glow. All these lovely claims that we're looking at here, and they need to be, they all need to be substantiated. Also on TV, you might want to have some claims on TV, and there are really clear guidelines about having evidence behind those. So we've got sort of things from L'Oreal, about 79% of people agree, 77% of 207 people agree. And then also I wanted to put another interesting one in there. So 91% of consumers would choose this over market competitors. So it's a bit of a different one to put out there, not just agreeing with the effect, but that comparison claim and saying, you know, would you choose it? Would you rather use this one? So yeah, a good example of how else you can do it, not just from the product claims. There's also shopping channels like QVC. We see a lot of evidence on there. And I've got an example for you. So bear with me while I change my sharing of my screen. So yeah, just because obviously anything on QVC has to be done through consumer. Well, there has to be research behind what they're saying. They can't just go on and say all these amazing things about the product if there's no research behind it. So you'll see if you watch QVC or any shopping channels, there's always a segment for any product that shows the evidence behind it. So that's what I want to show you today. So we've got this Philosophy Miracle Worker SPF 30.
Because skin can get better with time. In a clinical study, after
So as you can see, it's a really good way of of kind of promoting that evidence in a different sort of format. So they've got really clear guidelines. I put the guidelines for QVC there just to give you some idea of how strict they are about the kind of things they need. You know, sort of examples that it needs to be within 1 year. So a lot of people have evidence dating back on their studies, but if you wanted to go into QVC, you'd have to have recent evidence. It's really important. So yeah, then other shopping channels obviously have really clear guidelines as well. Also, just a note to say, claims on labels and packaging obviously need to be substantiated as well. This is from ICAS, the International Council of Ad Self-Regulation that I mentioned earlier. So all different global advertising standards are basically saying that they didn't used to sort of see a label packaging as an advert, but it very much is, because you're saying benefits about your product. Your consumers are choosing to use it by reading the packet if they're in the store. So you need to make sure that that's all going through the same code of conduct, through the same process. So, want to go through some case studies now, because we've talked a lot about how you use the claims and what you need to have, but we haven't actually talked about what it looks like to get that evidence in the first place with reference to testing the product. So I've chosen a couple of case studies to go through of a couple of different types of sun care products. The first one is a sun protection SPF 30 spray. This is by a leading pharmacy, a global retailer in kind of pharmacy and health and beauty products. So we were looking at any advertising claims they currently had in the US market. So we'd already had some evidence behind this, but now they were looking to launch into Australia. So obviously wanted to test there in particular. As most people know, Australia weather is quite unforgiving. It's a very, very harsh kind of sun. So we want to make sure that we're making, it's really applicable to the ambient temperature and climate. We needed to substantiate the claims in that territory because we're selling there. And in particular, they're looking at lasting protection and ease of use, kind of pleasure to use for children. So we're looking at families really for this particular spray. So as I mentioned, the study was conducted in Australia. It's a single placement, which basically means we're just investigating the one product on its own. 14 days gives us plenty of time to look at that initial use, but also how they felt using it over time. All different skin types. We want to make sure it's quite open. We're just looking for kids in general. All age ranges, but obviously specifically families. So obviously it's for kids, but we want to make sure the parents are using it as well, and then they're commenting on how it feels to use on their kids. You can't really ask a young child to say this is the best product you've used. They don't really know. So we want to get that feedback from the parents as well. It needed to be national, so we didn't want to just kind of target one area of Australia. It's quite a big country. There can be differences in climate. So yeah, we need to make sure that we're getting people from all over the country to test it. So what does the results look like? So this has come straight from our report. So once we sent out the product and they've used it and they've then answered their online questionnaire, we're basically looking at this summary table that we've taken from our report here. So we've got all of the questions or the claims. Well, I've selected a few questions and claims from the report. We have the number of people that are satisfied, neutral, and not satisfied, and then the percentage of people that had a satisfied, neutral, or not satisfied answer. What we're looking for is the percentage of people that are satisfied. When we were looking at those claims online earlier and on TV, the 77% of people agree that that this product does whatever. That's what we're trying to lift out straight away so we can use it in our marketing, but also make sure that they're passing the overall majority. So you can see that we've got a little asterisk next to the percentage satisfied. We've set a pass mark of at least 70% to make sure we have a clear majority. So yeah, that they've all passed that quite clearly. We've got some really great results here. So things like we can say 100% of people, so the product's easy to apply. These are all the kind of things I said about ease of use for children. So is the product easily absorbed? It doesn't leave white marks. It's water resistant. So how much do you agree with that? Do you think it's water resistant as well? Obviously kids, they go swimming a lot when they're in hot weather, that kind of thing. And also making sure that it was preventing the skin from peeling or anything like that after exposure. I think we've got some fantastic claims there that they can use in their marketing. Talking about legislation, always bringing it back to the reason that we're actually doing the research and making sure that it's compliant. This is from the Australian Society of Cosmetic Chemists, who are very much leading the way in building up regulations in Australia for advertising and for cosmetics. And essentially, they're saying that claims have to be capable of substantiation, and that if they're not substantiated, it's ultimately damaging to the cosmetics industry because it's unfair to the consumer and it's unfair to your competitors. So basically, the current legislation is designed to ensure the truthfulness of claims. Sorry, keep hitting my laptop today. Designed to make sure that yeah, it's all designed to ensure the truthfulness of the claims as well. And again, like I said, a lot of things are self-regulatory, so it really is the spirit of the industry to make sure they're doing those things and doing it off their own back and not trying to get away essentially with having uncompliant claims. So the other case study I just wanted to go through is, like I said, a bit of a different product with SPF. It's a lip treatment, quite a common product to have SPF in it. Something people use a lot. If it's got SPF, it's going to help your lips be protected. So this is from a skincare brand who really focus on developing products for problem skin. So this one basically is making sure that we've got all of the advertising claims substantiated in the UK, but also to reflect the use of colder climates. So we wanted to say it was suitable for use for winter sports. So quite an interesting one there, essentially testing this product to its limits. If you've been on a winter sports holiday before, you'll know that obviously it's very cold weather, which is quite bad anyway, but it tends to also get quite sunny. And you've got a lot of exposure to that because it bounces off the snow and things like that. So you've got that real exposure to UV rays and also to very cold climate. A lip treatment is going to be very helpful in that kind of climate as well. And the specific claims they're looking for are relief for dry, flaky, chapped and cracked lips as well. So what was our protocol for this one? This was a UK one, but we were looking for 25% of the people to go to go away for a winter sports holiday at the same time. It's cut off with the picture there. It says while doing winter, but it's meant to say winter sports. We've got them to use a lip balm regularly already. So they're kind of using it as a comparison as well to their usual products. But also, we don't want to have an unfair playing field. If they've never used anything before and they have very dry, flaky, chapped, cracked lips and they use a product, there's going to be a real bias there. But if they're already using products, it's not really working. We know that we can get some really good data from the people that would purchase this product. It's a 4-week study, so it's a bit longer. We want to make sure that we're measuring this over time. So not just the initial use, is it relieving, but it's actually improving the condition of those lips over time. And again, we've got the same table here. So we've got our summary table again, and again, we can see some really fantastic results, all over 80% for this product. So people saying that their lips felt relief from dehydration, 87%, that's going to look fantastic in marketing. It's overall improving the condition of cracked lips. It's looking improved, feeling nourished and cared for, feeling hydrated, and again, just a general improvement of the texture of the lips. These are fantastic marketing claims that are really going to help sell this product. And again, just want to bring up the legislation behind that. So this is basically from the ASA, the Advertising Standards Authority in the UK, and saying that any sensorial claims which are based on opinion should be substantiated with consumer research data. So all of those things to say, my texture looks improved, it feels really cared for. These are all sensorial claims. Consumers, again, it's very much based on opinion. Do they feel like their lips look improved and feel improved? Do they feel more comfortable and relieved? So just kind of looking at the examples of removed ads. So what happens if you don't have your claim substantiated? Kind of on the other side. And really the main thing is bad press. I think that's what I want to bring up with this one. The ASA in particular and other advertising standards globally are very vocal about people that have misled claims. USA is another one that really, really puts it out there if people have been seen to be misleading. China's another one that really, really publishes this information. So this is what you're kind of looking at, is these big headlines, which you really want to avoid. So examples here to say that the safety tests that were basically seem to be not appropriate for the right type of product. We had L'Oreal banned because they'd basically had a misleading ad about the UVA protection. And also, this was an interesting one. The Green people had basically said that there was only a 1% difference between an SPF 30 and an SPF 50, but actually that wasn't true. So it was a bit of an interesting kind of attack on the industry itself, which was unsubstantiated. So I just found that one a really interesting example. So basically, that's kind of the overall picture. So this is what we're looking at for substantiating claims and the evidence, particularly for sun protection and SPF. Again, what we really want to do today is get you thinking about basically how you can change, elevate your marketing, not just kind of make sure your claims are compliant, but actually make sure you have some evidence to really start boasting about what your product can do. So I just kind of want to let you know that's how you do it, but why should you use Ayton Global Research? We're an award-winning research agency. We're compliant with the GDPR, and we have an ISO 27701 or 7001. To prove that, it's a bit of an audit that we go through, and an ISO 9001 as well, which is to look at our quality assurance and all of our processes. There's undesirable event reporting. I haven't really touched on that too much, but that is a really important part of any product test. When I was saying about reflecting the actual conditions in use, we also are reflecting the actual irritations in use as well. It can be really important for sun cream. It tends to be one of those products that people have higher irritations to. So yeah, really good to get that feedback as well, not just kind of in a safety assessment, but when people are actually using it. We're all compliant with the Cosmetic Vigilance Act in accordance with that as well. And we've got full product liability insurance in every country that we operate. It's really important that you're using a research agency that does. It protects you and your consumers and us as a research agency as well, if anything is to go wrong in terms of irritations on your study. We're a partner to the Market Research Society, so obviously our research is not just done properly but ethically as well. So things about not rewarding the consumers for taking part in a product test, removing any bias that we can, removing as much bias as possible. We can give bespoke regulatory advice. That's what I really help with. And also you get a designated study manager, so you're not sort of passed around different people. You have one point of contact who really knows who you are, your brand is, and what you're trying to achieve, so you can make sure everything is kind of done in that process as well. Just a few FAQs before we go to the Q&A. So basically we say that the best kind of starting point for responses is about 100 responses in terms of panel size. This is really dependent on the amount of subgroups you're investigating, but it tends to be the most robust number. Yeah, so people it's just a good place to start thinking. People always ask, what kind of thing is common here, and really 100 responses is most common. We've mentioned about product liability, but also you need to inform your product liability insurance that you're conducting consumer studies. You need to make sure that your samples have been safety tested before a consumer research study. It needs to be safe for them to use on the point that they can purchase the product, essentially. Samples have to be debranded. Again, we've mentioned this. We want to remove as much bias as possible. You need to make sure your questionnaire design is going to support your claims and reflect them. And we can very much help with that as well. We're very good at questionnaire design and knowing what to do to make sure your claims are substantiated. So I'm going to go to the Q&A now. So please feel free to put any questions that you have into the little Q&A box, and I'll be happy to answer whatever I can. So I'll leave that open for a couple of minutes for you. I'm also going to be sending out the recording, as I mentioned. So you'll have my contact information from that. So if you've got a burning question you don't want to ask right now, or you think later on, you are very welcome to email me separately, and I'll be very happy to help. So I've had one question in. Do we conduct clinical SPF and PA++ tests? So basically, we don't do any clinical testing in-house ourselves, but we do have partners that we're very closely linked with that are able to test for those kinds of things. So yeah, we're very happy to assist there. If you need to do that kind of testing, just feel free to reach out and we can seek partners, quotes from our partners. So I hope that helps. So is there a minimum percentage which counts as legal substantiation? So there isn't kind of a very clear guide here, but obviously it needs to be a majority. So what we do is we set a statistical majority into our kind of system, which is about 66.66%. And that's what we would say is our minimum pass mark. As I mentioned earlier, though, a lot of people look at 70% because it's more robust. And also for things like television advertising, there is a minimum of 70%. So it really depends on where you're looking at advertising as well. Even certain platforms might only be happy with a certain amount, and certain retailers might be happy with a certain amount. So again, I would always look at 66.66% as a minimum, and if not, you can or higher basically. We have seen people that have done 51%, but I wouldn't recommend it. At the end of the day, if someone complains about that product, and that's kind of, like I said, it's kind of how it's regulated. If someone complains about it and the ASA find out that you've got 51%, they'll probably tell you to remove that advert because it's not substantial data. Yeah, and the main thing is, I always think, is just be really confident. Always imagine that your claim is going to come under scrutiny. And in that way, you can make sure you've got really good, robust evidence there. I think there's a question that's come through the chat. So do you have questions which you use for blue light protection claims? So again, we don't tend to do that in-house personally, because it's consumer research we're looking at. A consumer can't say if they've got blue light protection. What we can do, and this is quite common, is usually ingredient claims that the product's been formulated with tend to have blue light protection. So the product's been formulated in that way. And we can then ask our consumers about anything that they that relates to it. So for example, if we know that blue light is drying on the skin, we can ask them, does their skin feel more hydrated, less dry? But we're looking at kind of the symptoms essentially of blue light and seeing if that's been improved directly, because that the consumer can assess. I hope that kind of makes sense. And again, there is other clinical studies about the final product in blue light as well, and we would be able to reach out to our partners for that. So what's the range of costs between for 100 people for 4 or 5 claims on a study? Please email me and I'll be able to help you with that. It does depend on a few factors, things like the countries in which we're doing the study, the duration of the study, and what the claims are, what the product type is. So please feel free to email me afterwards, and I'll be really happy to provide you with some quotes there based on some more specific, specifics basically. Great. Well, I can't see any more questions coming in right now. So I'll finish up the webinar, but as I mentioned, please do feel free to reach out if you've got any other questions at another point. So just to finish up, I've got some upcoming webinars which you might be interested in. So the next one, next Friday, is going to be for baby and childcare products. We've got Brexit and testing implications, which I'll be doing with our German franchise. Making effective claims in South America. Substantiating claims for electrical products and tools, so that can be anything from a microwave to a hair straightener. Panel sizes, again, we've mentioned that kind of earlier, and I've got some really good detailed information about how to make sure you've got the right panel size. And then we'll be looking at some cosmetic trends for the year and how you can substantiate those claims. So dates for your diaries, I'll be sending out invites, but yeah, please do, feel free to tune into those. Also, a little bit of attention towards the SDS, the Society of Cosmetic Scientists. If you're interested in doing any courses in the Essentials of Cosmetic Science, go to look at their distance learning course. It can be done in your own time and it can be done anywhere in the world. So very interesting course to look at there. There's also going to be the IFSCC Congress, which is next year, 2022, in September, and we're very hoping we can host that in London. I'm very, very optimistic that by 2022 we'll all be able to meet in person. And there's my contact information. So thank you very much for tuning in today. I'll be sending out the recording afterwards, so you'll receive that and you can have a look in your own time. And also feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend, and thank you again for listening.